This man, with a cross tattooed on the back of his neck, could be said to be the most terrifying presence in the prison. He not only beats up other inmates but also shows no respect for the guards, easily breaking their arms. Normally, when people go to prison, they want to be on good behavior to get out early. But he chose to commit more crimes just to get into the most terrifying place in the United States. Red Leaf Prison. Because there's a legendary cell number 99 that he's always dreamed of experiencing. The man's name is Thomas. He used to be a firearms dealer and a boxer. After giving up that life, he wanted to find a stable job, but he was fired less than 2 days after starting. He drove home in frustration and accidentally discovered his wife looking flustered in a car by the side of the road. Sensing something was wrong, he rushed over to check. Sure enough, there was a fresh hickey on his wife's neck. Thomas grabbed her purse and searched for her phone. The hundreds of intimate messages inside confirmed her affair. His wife quickly ran home. Thomas, on the other hand, took his anger out on the car. He not only punched and broke the windows but also used his hands to smash the rearview mirrors, even tearing the car apart piece by piece. Although he seems like a violent person, even a man of steel has a soft side. He would rather fight the car until his hands bleed than lay a single finger on his unfaithful wife. His wife explained that it wasn't her intention. It was just that Thomas hadn't been intimate with her for 6 months. Leaving early and coming home late every day, never caring about her feelings. Hearing these words, Thomas felt a little remorseful. In truth, he had always loved his wife deeply. So he decided to refocus on his family. To salvage their relationship, he not only forgave his wife's infidelity but also wanted to have a child with her. But having just lost his job, he no longer had a source of income. How could he provide a better life for his family? So Thomas thought about his old profession, dealing firearms. Although it was illegal and he could be thrown in jail at any time, profit came with risk. In less than a year, he had upgraded his car and bought a mansion. His wife also got pregnant as they had hoped. The two of them were now inseparable. But just as he was about to go to bed with his wife, his phone rang. The mob boss had suddenly received a big job and, trusting only Thomas's abilities, he quickly called him to come. When he rushed to the scene, the boss was already negotiating with a Mexican drug lord. The other party wanted to smuggle a large shipment of contraband into the US. The boss was worried, so he arranged for Thomas to supervise the entire process to prevent any mistakes. With his extensive experience, Thomas immediately realized that the opponent's subordinate was definitely a drug addict. This deal was very high risk. But the boss didn't care. He declared that if this was successful, he would give Thomas a bigger commission, enough to support his family and their child for the rest of their lives. Furthermore, the boss was a businessman and included a 3-month maternity leave as a bargaining chip. He successfully tricked Thomas into accepting the mission. The boss ordered Thomas to make it clear that he needed him to perform a task. To encourage Thomas, he promised to reward him with 2 months of leave when his daughter was born if the job was done well. He also emphasized that Thomas must obey him absolutely and others would follow his orders. To test his obedience, the boss asked Thomas what he would do if he ordered him to throw away the goods. Without hesitation, Thomas affirmed that he would throw them away. A few days later, Thomas and 2 men met at the port late at night as planned. This shipment was relatively safe by sea, but he was always a little worried about these 2 unfamiliar faces. Upon reaching the designated location, one of them changed into a diving suit and went down, fumbling in the dark water. Not long after, he found the target. After cutting the iron chain with pliers, the box successfully floated to the surface. Just as they were loading the goods and preparing to retreat, Thomas directly threw the goods into the sea. He ordered the 2 men to quickly get rid of them because his years of experience told him that the atmosphere near the port was a little strange. But the 2 men not only ignored his advice but also threatened him with a gun, telling him not to hinder them from making money. As a result, before the 2 of them could get far, the piercing sound of police sirens echoed throughout the port. They still had time to escape, but these 2 idiots pulled out their guns and confronted the police head-on. This action directly caused the police to increase their forces. In an instant, the police had surrounded the entire port area. At this moment, Thomas knew he couldn't escape his fate. But if those 2 fools were caught, they would definitely expose everyone. Following the principle of eliminating future threats, he decisively raised his gun and shot 1 man dead. then took down the other with his bare hands. He then obediently put his hands behind his head and accepted the police's judgment. At the police station, he thought he was clever by saying he had helped, which reduced police casualties. He believed he could use this to lighten his sentence, even if he was guilty. But his move had been anticipated by the director, who knew the whole situation. Now, Thomas only had two choices. First, he could reveal the mastermind behind it and try to get a pardon. Second, he could take the fall for all the crimes himself, which would mean at least 5 years on a sewing machine. The director probed Thomas, suggesting he provide a few names, or at least some important names that could help the investigation. He even offered to provide a list for Thomas to point out the one in charge. Hearing those words, Thomas blurted out that he couldn't even finish reading movie subtitles. The director coldly replied by asking Thomas if he found it funny, stating that his little joke was indeed amusing. He said Thomas had a choice, but he didn't. Finally, the director revealed that Thomas's wife had told him they were about to have a little girl. Upon hearing the news, his wife came to visit with her big belly. Thomas knew that if he exposed the mob boss, his family could very well face a brutal revenge. For the safety of his wife and child, he could only choose to endure it all himself. The court found that the defendant did not want to make a plea or admit guilt. Following the police and court's judgment, Thomas was sentenced to 7 years in prison for transporting a large amount of contraband and was sent to a regular prison. On his very first day, the guards started to cause trouble. During the body search, someone mocked him as a kid. When he was assigned to his cell, someone threatened his life. But Thomas wasn't bothered by any of that. The only thing that concerned him was his wife and child. Late at night, a guard yelled for the inmates to line up at the door. Thomas was sleeping too soundly and didn't come out immediately, which gave the guard an opportunity to humiliate him wildly. First, he shined a high-intensity flashlight in Thomas's face, then threatened him, claiming he was a famous boxer in the prison who could beat him to a pulp. After enduring the first night of torment, Thomas felt the sheer tedium of prison life. At the same time, a white-haired old man who introduced himself as a doctor came to visit. They had no prior connection, and Thomas was full of questions, but the man didn't give him a chance to ask. Then, he bluntly stated that Thomas had cost the Mexicans over $3 million in the previous deal. He was here this time to warn Thomas. His pregnant wife had been kidnapped. To save her, he had to find a way to transfer to Red Leaf Prison. There, in cell 99, was a man named Bridges. If he killed him, he would be reunited with his wife and child. Otherwise, they would arrange for a professional doctor to perform an abortion. Although he was furious, Thomas, who always put his family first, could only helplessly accept the mission. Red Leaf Prison was known for its strictness. The only way to get transferred there was to cause a major incident. So, on the way back to his cell, Thomas attacked a guard. After all, this was the same guy who had bragged earlier and targeted him. Beating him up felt like a good way to vent his frustration. But Thomas was a professional boxer. The guard was subdued before he could even react. Thomas even used so much force that he accidentally broke the man's arm. Immediately after, the other guards heard the commotion and ran over. He pretended to surrender first. Then, as he went down the stairs, he unexpectedly attacked a few more people. After all, with his hands cuffed, he couldn't unleash his full strength. Even though he was beaten up by the guards working together, this fulfilled his desire to be transferred to Red Leaf Prison. Just by looking at the intimidating presence of the guards and the warden, it was clear this wasn't a prison, it was a gang. This place was notoriously strict, so the staff were basically all equipped with live firearms. The arrogant warden stepped forward. In his eyes, all the inmates who came to Red Leaf Prison were just toys for him to butcher at will. If Thomas dared to provoke him, he would shoot him dead. Not only would it create an empty cell, but it would also save himself some trouble. With that, he ordered his subordinates to throw clothes on the ground. A full body strip search and change of clothes in broad daylight were the standard welcome ceremony upon arrival. After checking Thomas's record from the previous prison, the warden decisively threw him into the most special cell. This place reeked. The toilet was full of waste. He would have to stay there for at least 2 weeks before being moved to another cell. He would probably be preserved in there. He used his inner clothes as a makeshift mask to endure the stench. When he finally endured it and was able to go out for some freedom, the first thing he did was find an inmate to talk to. Thomas asked if he knew anyone named Bridges who was in cell 99. But the fellow inmate said, "The people in cell 99 are extremely vicious murderers and psychopaths. They never come out for activities." Hearing this, Thomas realized that he hadn't caused enough trouble yet. So he targeted a few individuals who looked unsociable. He puffed out his chest and walked up, using all sorts of provocative language. His goal was to get them to fight him. When it came to fighting, he had never lost. So he didn't even pay attention to the useless kids who were there. In just 3 moves, he had taken down several people. Even when the guards overhead raised their guns as a warning, he didn't flinch and subdued the last person. On his very first day in Red Leaf Prison, he caused such a huge commotion. This made things very difficult for the guards. You just lost the only bit of freedom you had. With no other choice, the warden had to personally intervene. This was the exact result Thomas had been hoping for. The spinning gun barrel is your congratulation for leveling up, kid. He was finally about to get into the legendary cell 99 he had always wanted. Seeing that the mission was about to be completed, Thomas obediently let the guards take him down to the basement. The brutality here far exceeded his imagination. The walls were not only covered with various torture devices, but every inmate who entered was also forced to wear an electric shock collar. You'll be wearing this for the next month. With just a press of a remote button, a strong current would run through the body. Even a man like Thomas couldn't withstand it for more than a few seconds. I'll give you a taste of it every now and then. Maybe when you're urinating, or maybe when you're defecating. Even more outrageous, the floor of each cell was covered with tiny shards of broken glass. If an inmate disobeyed and was shocked to the ground, the glass would directly pierce their body, inflicting a double dose of pain. Thomas struggled to get up. He had only been there for an hour and was already so brutally tortured it was unbearable to watch. But since things had come to this, he could only persevere. After all, his kidnapped wife was still waiting for him to rescue her outside the prison. The old man who called himself a doctor had brought a doctor along, ready to perform an examination and forcibly remove the baby. A night passed and Thomas was called out by the guard again. To avenge his broken arm, the guard repeatedly pressed the electric switch to torture him. "Don't blink until I allow you to." That wasn't all. He then took Thomas to a large warehouse. And all the mysteries were completely revealed. Because of the previous failed contraband shipment, the Mexican drug lord was also tracked down by the police and thrown into prison. However, he had a lot of money, so he bribed the guards here, leaking the information for his henchmen to find Thomas. The so-called Bridges didn't exist at all. This was just a lie to lure him here. The drug lord's life had been ruined by him, so he also wanted to ruin everything Thomas had. Now that the hostage was in their hands, Thomas was like a fish in a barrel. They didn't plan to act immediately but wanted to torture him a few more times before dealing with him and his wife. Under the continuous kicks and punches, Thomas gradually lost consciousness. When he woke up, he was lying on a bed with serious injuries. Before, he didn't dare to fight back because he still had hope of saving his wife and child. But now he understood deeply that even if they dealt with him, his wife and child would not have a good ending. Rather than enduring humiliation, he would go all out. A plan for revenge gradually sparked in his mind. To avoid that damn electric current, he stuffed a shoe sole into the collar's gap. Later, when he was led to the warehouse as usual, the guard was about to press the button. But Thomas, who had insulated the current, took him down. He threw the 2 guards into a cell and used the keys he had stolen to free himself. It's time to end all of this. He went to the opponent's warehouse where they first sent a kung fu fighter to greet him. But this kind of attack, in Thomas's eyes, was just a few cat scratches. To eliminate the threat, he even gave him an extra, special gift. The other 2 were quite frightened, but they had to protect their boss. So they gritted their teeth and attacked. But they could only withstand a few more punches than the kung fu fighter. And their ultimate fate was to be taken down. At this moment, the drug lord was hiding behind a wall. Making a phone call, he told his subordinate that if he didn't hear from him in an hour, to deal with the hostage directly. The drug lord thought such a threat would make Thomas back down. But it only fueled his desire for revenge even more. He didn't hesitate to take down the drug lord, breaking his back. Seeing that his life was in danger, the drug lord had no choice but to agree to the terms. Thomas said that his wife and child must be handed over to his own boss. Then, he dragged him into a cell. At the same time, the warden led his men over upon hearing the commotion. Since the prison exit was blocked by a few people, Thomas could only use the hostages in the room as a threat. If the warden dared to lead his men inside, Thomas would not leave anyone alive. His only request was to wait for a phone call. As soon as he confirmed his wife was safe, he would let them handle him. And for the safety of the others, the warden had no choice but to compromise. The drug lord's henchman drove his wife to the boss. She pulled out a gun she had hidden and decisively dealt with the driver in the car. The doctor in the car was terrified and ran away in a hurry. The wife, who had become the toughest pregnant woman, snatched the gun and sent him on his way as well. After everything was taken care of, the phone in Thomas's hand rang. The news that his wife was safe completely lifted the burden from his heart. At this point, he knew death was inevitable. For his wife to give birth safely, he didn't tell her the truth, only reassuring her that everything was normal. Before he was executed, he asked his wife to put the phone on her belly, and said his final farewell to his child. The tough man, who had not shed a single tear from beginning to end, finally couldn't hold back his emotions. Not having the chance to be reunited with his wife and child was his only regret in life. But being able to save his wife and child was also the most worthwhile thing he had ever done. After hanging up, Thomas broke the phone, severing his last connection to this world. He went to the drug lord and used the most violent method to unleash the hatred in his heart. He would never forgive the mastermind behind all of this. As the drug lord's head fell to the ground, the warden and his men arrived at the door. Thomas put his hands behind his head and calmly accepted his death. This wasn't the best ending he had hoped for, but being able to bring happiness to his family and giving his life for it was a death he would not regret. The value of a movie lies in its reputation, and the value of a movie review lies in its sentiment. This story ends here. Thank you all for watching. How did you feel about this movie? Please let us know in the comments below.